Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura, and I practice as a therapist in New York City. I have my bachelor's and master's in social work and currently work in private practice. Today we are just going to talk about 2021, the kind of a year in review, and then the second half we'll be talking about 2022, maybe some things that I want to try this year, some ideas of things, how we can grow, resolutions as social workers for the new year. So let's dive in. Now, again, like I said, I live in New York City. There's a siren going by right now. There might be some noise, and I do apologize for that. Diving into the lessons that I really took away, there's quite a few, so we're just gonna get right to it. The first one is burnout is very real, even if you are a new graduate. Something that I thought was that it would take me a really long time in social work to get burnt out and that I was never going to get to that space. And I was proven wrong quite quickly. There were some other factors going on too in my personal life that added to that overwhelm and that burnout. But my grad school internship and then my job for about a year and a half after I graduated with my MSW in May 2020 I was a therapist in a community mental health clinic. My commute was an hour and a half there, an hour and a half home. I was working like 60 hours a week, but it was fee for service, so it was almost like I was making minimum wage because of the no-shows I would have. It was just very overwhelming. The agency in itself wasn't incredibly supportive. My supervisors were a little sporadic. There was constant change, and it was an independent environment, but it was so independent where you really just felt like you didn't have support. Where the difference now is I work in a private practice where I'm so supportive, I'm so cared for. My supervisors really care about my well-being and self-care and that I'm taking vacation. But they also allow us like independence and like, okay, how many clients can you handle? Like kind of like the basic stuff, but it's such a different environment. So something that was really, really important that I learned very quickly was the importance of self-care and having identity outside of social work, because I think those were the two major things that led to my burnout. Was that my job was literally my life, not by choice, but because it felt like I didn't have time. I would literally leave early in the morning, I'd get to work, I'd work for such a long time, and then I would get home and I would just like go immediately to bed, or I'd be on my phone because it was like the one moment I had to myself, and it was just a cycle of work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep. And it really felt like I was working for the weekend. And the weekend was just spent like trying to recover. And it wasn't even doing anything fun or exciting. Living in New York City, I was 22 and 23 at the time. Like it was just like not a fun time. I was not living life. So having self-care, regular self-care, like I've talked about before, I see my own therapist. We're going to get into that too. I think it's important for to practice what we preach and to get therapy ourselves, just as a support, but especially also if you have your own mental health concerns you're dealing with. I've been treated for PTSD and for depression, and because of the therapy I went through, that actually really helped me and supported me in leaving that job and finding a new job that was more supportive, only a 10-minute commute for me, 10 to 20-minute commute. Incredible environment. And it was because of, honestly, therapy, really being able to process these things and to understand how can I create some sort of change in my life. So that was really helpful. And of course, that goes into my next one, is a lesson I learned was changing jobs, especially when maybe it's better pay, a better environment, work-life balance, a new job to prevent burnout, maybe a fresh start, maybe the organization you're at is just completely unsupportive and chaotic. Changing jobs is okay. You can only put your clients first for so long. And that was such a huge reason why I didn't leave my first job, was because I was in it for the clients. I knew that they had experienced a lot of turnover. but I had to accept that that was not something I could change myself. That was something the organization had to change. And I think it was through my leaving, in a similar time, other therapists, a handful of therapists left at the same time. It's being a part of that pattern that will help the organization see we're doing something wrong and something has to change. So obviously it was still hard for my clients, and that was something we had to process together, but it was so important. We already serve other people as our job, and our jobs are already hard enough in a supportive environment, having to be emotionally available and be in the space that we're in. It's tough. And so if we can make the best of our environment and be in a supportive workplace, then do it. Do it. Number 3, it's important to have hobbies that are not social work related. This kind of goes into having identity outside of social work. I really tied this idea of, okay, I'm not passionate about social work if I spend time doing other things, especially coming out of school. Like, you're literally in school. Your identity is that of a student your entire life. And so being mindful of that adjustment, which I just made a podcast about adjusting after school, after you graduate. But having identity outside of that role, because when I was in college, it was my sole identity, right? I wanted to get good grades. I wanted to get into a good grad school. I really wanted to establish my foundation as a great social worker with a strong education and skill set. And then I actually get into like the adult world where you're working, you have a full-time job, you have bills to pay. And it was really eye-opening for me to see that, I really needed something outside of my job. Like, I would get home at the end of the day, which this fed into the fact that I was burnt out. And so it felt like I just really didn't care about social work anymore. But like, I love reading. I love going to webinars. I love developing my knowledge and my skills. And I just did not want any of that, like, at all. I would get home and I'd have like all these social work books and these fantastic reads, which I'll probably do a YouTube video about. But it was really like, I couldn't care. I could not care less. And so it was through changing jobs, healing myself, healing from burnout. It was through that process where I had to really establish, and I'm still learning, who I am outside of being a social worker. And that's still something I talk about with my therapist now. And, I do have a lot of other things going on in my personal life where it's important to keep those boundaries up with family members and with friends, making sure you're not that therapist and that social worker all the time, and having those boundaries for yourself and for the people in your life. Number 4 is maintaining routine and structure, which is so, so important for self-care and also for productivity. So something I've already known this about myself. I think it's almost human nature to want structure and want routine. And I do think, there's so many unknowns and so many things in our life that happen to us. We can at least have control over our routine and our structure for the most part, right? And for me, that's always been very important. I love to make lists. I love to plan. I take a lot of pride in it. And it's honestly a way that I just really enjoy it. I love stationery and writing things down. And so keeping a routine and a structure has been super, super important for me. And I've really observed what can happen when I don't. Like, that's when, like I said, I also have depression, and which makes it all the more important for me to kind of keep those habits up and keep those routines and structure up, is because when I don't, it's very difficult for me to just to live. not in a negative way, but it's hard for me to complete those daily tasks, to take care of myself if I'm not being intentional with it. And I think even outside of having a mental health condition, that's important to keep up, is because time goes by so fast. And if we're not intentional with our time, and if we don't have these systems and structures in place, things can very easily fall to the wayside. And before you know it, like, it's been a month and you haven't exercised. It's been 6 months and you haven't taken a day off. And so it's really important to be intentional with your time and to also create a routine in the morning, in the evening, throughout the day that allows you to keep the joy of social work, to keep your interest in the job, whether that's taking a walk during your lunch break, whether that's having some fun tunes, a creative office space, whatever it is. It's ultimately, those systems are there to help you, right? Just like we tell our clients, boundaries are in relationships because it shows that we are trying to maintain a relationship with someone. And so we have to have boundaries and routine and structure in our life, especially with social work, so we can keep our passion and love of social work. So that was also something I noticed was really important for my productivity. If I kind of just like wake up in the morning late and just roll out of bed and keep moving, it's going to be a rough start and I'm going to feel overwhelmed. So just something to keep in mind. Number 5, vulnerability with yourself and with your supervisor will only allow for growth. Again, this is something where just me personally, I've always struggled with vulnerability. I do it as like a way to protect myself, and I don't want to be a bother to other people. But I've really realized that, especially just being vulnerable with myself and with the people around me, can be so important. Not only that, but you're not alone. And I think sometimes we forget, like, I had such strict work boundaries, and to be honest, like, I still go to work and it's not like I'm sharing all the details of my personal life, but I'm also in such a supportive space now where, my supervisors do care about my well-being and they want to make sure, how I'm doing even outside of work and if there's anything that they can do. And I think that can really make all the difference, but that vulnerability aspect is very important. It can be really difficult to talk about a time when maybe you messed up or, things could have been different in your practice. And that's something that I've had to accept as well, is that, we're still learning and we're not going to be the perfect social worker and therapist. And there's going to be moments when maybe we say something that could have been better or different, or, we gain new knowledge, and, that's part of growing. We're not expected to be complete experts, especially out of the starting gate. But even down the road, like, we're still human and we have to give ourselves the flexibility to be human too. But that vulnerability can be so important in your growth as a professional and as a social worker. If I hadn't been vulnerable about some cases, like, I probably wouldn't have, served those clients in the best way possible. That it's through that vulnerability that we really learn new effective strategies and interventions, and, we grow ourselves. And then we can also teach clients about being vulnerable. When we're allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we also form a new skill set within that and understand the importance of vulnerability and how that can be so special for our clients too. Number 6, I did a podcast about this, but community mental health won't change unless we do. Like I said earlier, changing jobs was really important for me to take care of myself, but it was also a form of almost like protest in a way, where obviously me, myself, was not going to change the system. It was going to be a pattern. It was going to be massive change, perhaps over time, that created a change in this particular organization and hopefully in social work as a whole. But it was by me leaving my job that, okay, I was another therapist that was leaving at a similar time. They must be getting the message, right? And so that was something that was really important for me to recognize, was community mental health is going to stay the same unless we speak up, we use our voice, and we take action. Whether that's with pay, whether that's with caseloads, whether that's with just leaving that job if we're able to. The systems won't change unless we make them change. And so that's something just to keep in mind moving forward, is we have the ability to advocate and we should use that voice. Number 7, procrastination will only breed more stress and overwhelm. I'm mostly talking about my documentation here. I formed these bad habits when I was burnt out, and even at my new supportive job, I've kind of been unlearning procrastination. I don't even have that much paperwork to do anymore being in a private practice, but it's just about like motivating myself at the end of the day, like literally just take 5 minutes and do this paperwork, and so it doesn't build up, because if I procrastinate and it builds up, then it's just a mess. So that's been important for me to recognize. Number 8, the licensing exam is stressful, but it's possible to succeed. I've done another podcast episode about how I passed my licensing exam, what helped me there. I was very stressed out about it. I had a lot of anxiety. I was very nervous, and I took it, and I did a lot better than I thought I would. I believe my score was 125 out of 150. So in my other podcast episode, I go more into like my particular experience, how I was successful in that. But I know it can be very stressful. All of us are not good test takers. And so, be gentle with yourself, show yourself compassion, give yourself the time and the space that you need to prepare. So it is stressful. We need to acknowledge that, but it is possible to succeed in it, to do well, and to continue to move forward professionally. Number 9, getting involved in your community and connecting with other professionals will help improve your passion and prevent burnout. It can also inspire you, it can motivate you to stay creative and to keep doing great work and creating change. One of my saving graces, especially during the pandemic, has been being on the boards of a couple different organizations, and also just having like my Instagram and the Social Work Bubble brand in itself, which has helped me connect with so many other people. This year I was in a couple of different online conferences where I was a speaker, and it's just like those key moments, like on the day-to-day, just like being a regular therapist, doing all of this, it's wonderful and I love it, but sometimes it can feel isolating. But when you have a community of social workers and therapists around you that get it, where you can really just connect with them, you can talk about this field, you can like discuss like actionable ways to create change, and even just to like vent and connect and maybe have some dark humor, like it's really, really important. And there's been moments like I've had a rough day, but then I'm on the board for the National Association of Social Workers. I'm on the NYC committee for nominations and identification of leadership, something like that. So I'm on one of the board's committees, and that's been so important for me, is just being able to connect with others, share ideas, even after a long, difficult week or day. It can be so refreshing, honestly, and so I definitely recommend. Obviously, we extend ourselves a lot, and if this is a space where you need to have some boundaries and create balance, what works for you. But for me, even just being involved in like one thing, or getting involved with volunteering in my community, getting to know other people that are just supporting the community in different roles, even just as citizens. It's been so encouraging and so helpful, because, there's positive things happening in this world. In social work, I think sometimes we see most of the harm that's been done. We see a lot of the pain, a lot of the suffering. And so seeing other people that love the communities they're in and that, are doing great work it's really motivating, and I think it's really helped me to stay engaged and to stay in tune with what's going on in the world around me, and to not shut it off, because it can be so easy to, but to think of new ways to serve, and to be creative in how I can support other social workers and therapists. Number 10, never stop learning. So even close to a grad school graduation, I noticed that I really needed to refresh my memory on some of these therapy theories, on some of these like neurological concepts, like the chemicals in the brain, and how and like specific chemicals with specific mental health disorders, other information, especially when it's like pretty niche. I think with time it comes, like you gain an expertise in it with practice. But, there's been some moments where I had to be honest with the client, and I said, I don't know this off the top of my head. I'll have to get back to you, which was hard for me to do. But I think it's also important being honest. But I've really learned the importance of staying updated on research, on new research. I now get email notifications on like new published research articles from academia. But I think like if you've gone to grad school or even an undergrad, your school, you still have a school email address and you still have access to that school's research database. And so, if you're able to get email notifications on newly published research, you do that. Sometimes I just get like little short summaries sent to me, and that's been really helpful. Other times I like to just like dive into the whole paper, and that's been really interesting. But never stop learning. Part of social work is understanding that we're always growing, we're always getting new information, new research is being done, theories are being developed, skills and interventions are being changed and made better, and made more effective. And so it's really, really important. Like, just because you have your degree, it does not mean that the learning is done. It's important to, obviously, especially with licensing things, you'll probably have to take continuing education credits and everything, but just stay on top of it, because honestly, you'll probably feel better about your practice anyways. I think that's also helped with some of my imposter syndrome, is just feeling more prepared too. I think sometimes that just comes from the sense of unpreparedness, and being able to know that I'm staying informed has really helped me. The last one, number 11, something that was not a big takeaway, it was something I already knew, but it was definitely reaffirmed in this last year, was social work is political. And I've noted here in my podcast script, I say, especially as white, cisgender social workers, it is vital for us to stand with and fight for justice, not just for the communities we work with, but for our colleagues that come from diverse identities. Social work is really, honestly, overrun with white women, cisgender white women. Many of us are heterosexual, including myself, and it's genuinely our obligation as the quote-unquote majority that we are the ones that get rid of oppression, that we are the ones that actively challenge the oppressive systems, whether covert and overt, this oppressive systems that are in place. It's our responsibility. We created these systems, and so we must honestly destruct them, and reconstruct ones that are effective and non-oppressive and more supportive and equitable. So, big takeaway, again, something I already knew, but something that was especially reaffirmed in this last year, was social work is political. And if we aren't political, then we are doing our clients a disservice. We are doing this profession a disservice. It is our ethical obligation to be involved in social justice and reform. And to be quite frank, we are violating our code of ethics by not being political. And so it is important that we understand what systems are in place and we actively work to destroy the oppression that is there. So those are some takeaways from 2021. Things I'd like to incorporate into this year. The first couple are ones I really liked from the Instagram at the Private Practice Pro. So they listed a few, which I really liked. Some of theirs were: write a thank you card for every referral, create a schedule that prevents burnout, join a consultation group and attend that regularly, incorporate self-care into a daily schedule, make 10 new therapist friends, consistently update and consult with other clinicians, and finish your notes at the end of each day. They did an Instagram post with these. Again, the Instagram account is at the Private Practice Pro. I really enjoyed their content, so feel free to check them out. But I just really enjoyed this because it was a good reminder to have resolutions for this new year. We have resolutions and goals for the upcoming year with a lot of other things, and we need to incorporate that into social work or else we're going to stop growing. Some additional ones that I really liked are plan for supervision and to make the most out of it. I did some group supervision when I joined the private practice, and now we're actually headed into doing more independent individual supervision with like quarterly group meetings and team meetings. Before, I had individual supervision at the community mental health job, and it was honestly pretty sporadic and I wasn't getting a lot out of it. I would come prepared like with an agenda all set to go. In those situations, a lot of the times it was my supervisor that maybe did not have the time or space to actually provide me with effective supervision. For me, another one this year is to regularly attend therapy. This was something I did last year that was really helpful for me. I mentioned it, and things that I think I really took away from 2021 was, it's okay to get help yourself. It's honestly important that we do, whether or not we have a mental health condition. It's our job is hard. And, supervision, I think, is a lot of the time just case-based. That's not your space to vent to your supervisor to have a therapy session. It's your space to grow professionally. And so I would definitely recommend that everyone get their own therapist. We know the importance of mental health treatment and having support, even if it's just, more casual, more supportive. It has been so important for me in growing and in just like recognizing my own patterns that, I was okay with and that were actually not helpful for my life. Another one is to make it your goal to connect with other professionals every month. For me, that includes doctors, nurse practitioners that do medication management, or psychiatrists, or other just like primary care providers or other specialists in that areas. I have had to refer some clients to some specialists, case managers, other community programs. Really try to learn about like even one new program a month, whatever you have the time for, and really see like what their mission is, all of the services and resources that they provide. There's some organizations, like even the community mental health center I worked at, they had so many programs. There were even some I didn't even know the agency had. Like I was constantly learning about my own organization. And so that is really important to just stay informed, because that's part of helping our clients. Like, how can we provide them with the most effective resources if we don't even know what the resources are? There could be new nonprofits showing up all the time, new group therapy or support groups, new clinicians, maybe that move into town. And so just trying your best to stay informed on what's out there. Some social workers have these big binders like of resource books or a resource bulletin board, whatever just helps you. A lot of counties, especially if they're like government funded programs, they'll have those listed on their like county websites, in their mental health department pages. But outside of that, there's other organizations that might not be listed on there. So do your best. A lot of towns, a lot of counties also have like different like pop-up things for knowing what organizations are out there. Like they have like the table set up and like different merch and everything. So attend some of those, attend different conferences, maybe they're local or even just like statewide, and really see what's going on in your communities and other programs that are out there, because that can make all the difference in what services a client is getting. Another one is to be real with myself. This is a goal for myself. I want to challenge my imposter syndrome, but I also want to allow myself to, use that growth mindset and to see where I can improve my practice. I think sometimes many of us can almost operate in these extremes, right? Where, the imposter syndrome is speaking, and so we think we're a terrible social worker. But then on the other hand, we're not allowing ourselves to be like, what, I did have some area of growth here, and that's okay. Of course, we're gonna always need to grow because we're human, but not allowing it to be like a flaw, like, oh, I don't deserve this job. I mean, sometimes maybe we don't deserve this job if we're a terrible social worker, but usually if we have imposter syndrome, that's not the case. So just being real with myself, having the self-awareness, but also showing myself compassion. Another one is to get regular feedback from clients, whether they're old clients, maybe they've left, sending them an anonymous survey, whether they're new clients, maybe after the intake session, sending them a survey to see, how did this go, or even just having an open discussion in our sessions. Something that's really been helping me with some of my clients is even in the intake session saying, moving forward, working together, this is a relationship. It's important that we communicate different thoughts and feelings that are coming up. And if you feel like maybe something isn't working for you, or you want to switch gears in therapy, or even if I've said something that is upsetting for you, or you want to talk about it more, this is your space. You are the boss in this situation. You are paying for this service, and I want it to be as effective and helpful for you as possible. So it's important that we have those conversations. Obviously, sometimes we're not going to click, and that's okay to find another therapist, but I do think it's important to try to communicate and work through some of these things that come up. And if for some reason things just don't work out, then I'll support you in finding someone else. That's fine. It's important to have those conversations because it also gives the client permission to use their voice and to advocate for themselves, especially with you. It's a safe space, and so they should feel safe advocating for what they need in therapy. Another one is to get certified and specialized. I have some goals for getting certified in TFCBT and CBT this year, potentially, getting into behavior analysis. We'll see about that. So getting certified and specialized, we're going to try some things out this year and, add a credential, add some letters to your name, see what happens. Another one specifically for me, but it could relate to you, is growing my brand and my business to support social workers and others in the mental health field. The social work bubble, I think sometimes it can be at a standstill as a direct result of my own mental health and stress. And part of, like I said earlier, creating routine and structure in my life is not only for my own well-being, but, for this brand. The social work bubble has a lot of things going on. I'm going to start posting videos on YouTube. I have this podcast. I have the blog where I'll now this year also be publishing some articles, not just on my website, but also on Medium and on LinkedIn. Potentially, maybe in the works, some other websites as well. We also have, my Instagram, my Etsy shop, which will, again, hopefully in this upcoming year, a lot of changes. Will be expanding into physical products that can be shipped to you, not just digital resources. So there's a lot going on with the social work bubble. There's a lot of resources and supports I'm wanting to provide. And I've had these ideas for a long time and last year, but this year's the year to kind of implement them and to really grow and take action with what those look like. So with that, staying motivated and focused. I have a vision board that I created New Year's Eve, just for my life, my life aesthetic this year. It's really motivating. I really love it. And so I'm even thinking about creating one that's social work specific. So having a vision board, just a creative reminder. I'm a visual person. It's important for me to kind of have a visual reminder, to kind of keep me motivated in this field, to remind me of what my goals are. So that kind of wraps up my year in review and kind of goals for this upcoming year. Thank you all so much for listening. If you have any comments, you have your own resolutions, you have your own ideas or lessons that you took away from 2021, please feel free to share your experience in the comments. Whatever platform you're listening on, you can follow me at Social Work Bub on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, and you can check out the Social Work Bubble Etsy shop where I provide worksheets, activities, a whole bunch of resources, and like I said, some physical products in the future for social workers, therapists, and others in this field, and then my website, thesocialworkbubble.com. So I hope you're all staying safe. I look forward to continuing to grow together in this new opportunistic year in the wonderful field of social work.